Hello, and we are live. My name's Felix. I'm just on a page here. I was going to answer the first question, but I'm from Ledger, and we're going to be doing a live stream today. We're going to try and answer all of your questions. So if you guys want to pop those into chat, we'll try to go through all of the questions that you guys want us to answer and everything like that. I think first thing that I always mention is, please just never give out your 24 words. Don't sign in transactions you don't trust. And we'll go from there. But see already questions coming in. So I think we may as well get started. First question from Gerard. You've mentioned in order to take profits, which stablecoin can you use? That would generally depend on the network that you're operating on. Especially for EVM chains and things like that, that's why I had CoinGecko up in particular. You can probably use USDC. This is for EVM chains in particular. So BUSD you can use as well, DAI and things like that. So that's probably something that you could potentially look into the possibility of. Although, of course, that can depend on where you're hoping to take profits on. So if you're doing it on Ethereum, for example, I use the word EVM. And what I mean by that specifically is Ethereum virtual machine. So generally, things that have like a 0x address at the start. That's kind of a really quick primer on what that would be, although we could go into detail for a long time about that. But generally speaking, you can use USDC, USDT, BUSD, just depends on what's available for you in particular and what you prefer, of course. So no financial advice there, of course. Let's keep going. Next, we have just Lucifer here, just mentioning that 100 thumbs up to you. Thanks for the comment. We do love keeping you guys safe out there. So definitely, if you, Lucifer, have any questions, pop them into chat. We'll try to help you as best we can. But let's keep going. WZ is an interesting question. They mentioned how does a ledger device actually work? Why would you need a ledger device? When can you see crypto in Ledger Live? Can you send and receive without the device? So really a lot of interesting, cool questions there. How does the ledger work? I think I like to go to, actually I'll try it here. I was going to show some of this as well. We'll come back to this. The Ledger Academy. Now, with the Ledger Academy, you can go through, specifically with cryptocurrency, but you could also be about Ledger in particular and things like that. But I think what I always try to mention is how the Ledger device works in general, is that the Ledger device creates or generates basically a recovery phrase, and that's the private thing that you would use that you can sign transactions with, basically. The private key is derived from the recovery phrase. And when you use any wallet, it could be MetaMask, it could be Ledger Live, it could be Rabby, it could be Eternal, it could be Solflare. Like I'm naming all these other wallets. Essentially what will happen is that these interfaces will actually ask the Ledger device to sign a transaction. And when you sign the transaction, it's all done on the device itself. You can check, hey, what am I sending to? Where am I? What contract am I interacting with? So if I'm sending a particular token, for example, and then once it's signed, it'll return it back to the wallet. So Ledger Live, whatever ones I mentioned before, and it'll send it to a node to broadcast that transaction. Why is that important? Is because if you were using MetaMask in the way that it was initially intended to be used, so with the recovery phrase generated by the extension itself, same with all other extensions as well that might have the recovery phrase specifically on the computer, stored on the computer. If your computer was compromised, your assets could be taken because your recovery phrase is the thing that would allow you to know that you're the only person that can sign transactions for that address. So that's the specific thing that you would want a Ledger device for, is for security. It's not to say that and this goes on to your next question, can you send and receive without the device? No. You would want the device. That's part of the security there. If you wanted to send without the device, you might want to do so, with a hot wallet. So some of the options that I mentioned before. But generally speaking, you're not going to be able to send any assets without the device. That's kind of defeats the purpose of having that security there. That's not to say that you can't, input your recovery phrase into something else, and then you could send without the device. But then what would happen is that if your computer is compromised, like in the situation I mentioned before, someone else could take your funds. So that's kind of the reason that you'd potentially want to use a Ledger device. When can you see your crypto? I think you mentioned in Ledger Live. There would be specific things, and I've actually got the GitHub up here, but I'll have to get the... normally, actually, what I suggest might be the easiest way to check supported coins would be just on the website, supported crypto assets after ledger.com. So ledger.com/supported crypto assets. And you can check what's supported there. You can go into Ledger Live, which I will open here, and you can actually just go into the accounts tab and then go to receive. So that will show you what's supported as well, potentially. So those are a couple of ways you can do it. There's a GitHub link as well where you can see the lists of assets too. But I wouldn't normally suggest, going all the way down into GitHub to do that necessarily. But those are the two ways. Hopefully that answers the question. I do see a lot of other questions coming in. So if you had anything more in depth, definitely give us a shout out for any more questions as well. Donnie Woods mentions, how can you load ARB onto your Ledger device? You wouldn't be able to use it with Ledger Live in particular, since we don't support Arbitrum yet. I know it's something that they're working on, but you can use a third-party wallet, MetaMask, for example. You can use the Connect Hardware Wallet feature specifically, and that would be able to allow you to manage assets on different networks that we might not support yet. So actually, if I go to Ledger if you type in MetaMask here, you'll be able to see how you can connect your device with MetaMask. We wouldn't recommend, like I was saying before, to input your recovery phrase, but once you do that, you can go to somewhere like Chainlist. Let's use another tab, chainlist.org, I think IO is one, or WTF is one as well. But basically, you can just add in Arbitrum, and then you can go from there. Make sure it's Arbitrum 1. Arbitrum Nova is a separate network as well, and obviously not the testnets as well. All right, now let's keep going. Hopefully that does answer your question. Once you do that, you should be able to get sorted. But you did have another one. You mentioned, why is it that I have coins on my MetaMask wallet that don't show in my Ledger? It might be that there are specific assets that we don't show in Ledger Live. We might have delisted for a number of reasons. Potentially, like it's something that we may feel is not secure. Maybe that we don't have the specific fiat or US dollar or whatever currency that you might use value for that in particular on a back end, so that we can't show that. So there could be a couple of reasons, but being that you just mentioned Arbitrum, the most likely one could possibly be that the network isn't supported yet. So if you have things on Optimism, for example, something I also use a lot of, Arbitrum, then it may not be something that may show up just yet. But you can use MetaMask, you can use Rabi, you can use my Ethereum wallet, for example, to access potentially other networks if you'd like. So hopefully that answers your question, Donnie. I know that at least with networks, it's definitely something they're working on. So hopefully they'll be able to get that sorted soon. Now, Linwood Jones, hello again. Thanks for coming onto the stream. Always happy to recognize a face. So we've got Botros as well. You've mentioned, hi, when will we support Hedera tokens, dApps, not only HBAR? I wouldn't be able to give any specific time frame, unfortunately, Botros. I know that you just answered that question, asked that question again below. It's a bit unfortunate with most of the other particular when we're able to support things, questions, we wouldn't be able to give real time frames because we don't want to get your expectations up as well. We want to make sure that things are as good as they can be when they're released. And if they are delayed, we try to let you guys know as soon as we know as well. So couldn't give any time frame, but I'll definitely note that down in the future. All right. Let's move on to the next as well. Island move to, you've mentioned, you have some Matic on Polygon. Can you transfer them to Ethereum to get it staked? And you can indeed. You can actually use the Polygon bridge. That would be the canonical bridge that the guys would have potentially used. Let's just see. I don't always use this bridge in particular because there are other potential options out there. But if I connect this, for example, then you'll be able to, connect to your address. You can make sure you connect to Polygon, so you can potentially use Chainlist or whatever it might be to add Polygon if you haven't already, and then just bridge those tokens over as you might like. In this case, because you are talking about assets that are totally supported within Ledger Live, you can use Wallet Connect. You can copy that into clipboard, and then you can actually go to your Ledger Live as well. I've got Polygon here, and where is it? This one of the ones, and I can just go boom. Wait for it to load up, but essentially top right here, you can go Wallet Connect, and you can just connect that from there. So totally easy for you guys to do, to bridge those assets over, and then you can log on to the Polygon website. There's a staking website where you can actually stake that in particular. So just one of the things that you might need to do if you have assets on multiple networks. There are other options. Rango.exchange, I think, is one that has been mentioned to me by colleagues. I've used across.to, across.to in particular as well, to bridge it not just between Polygon and Ethereum, but you might want to bridge between like Arbitrum, Optimism, and things like that as well. No specific affiliation or anything like that at this stage as far as I'm aware, but it's just something that you guys can keep in mind. It's Thorchain as well as another one, actually, before I forget, that you might be able to use between networks if I remember correctly as well. So cool couple of options there for you, just in bridges in general, which I love the use of. All right, let's keep going. We've got another question by Carla. You've mentioned, how do you stop Coinbase from making auto withdrawals? That might be something that you'd want to check in with Coinbase. I'm not sure if you're talking about something that you have asked for a particular purchase of for an extended period of time, for example, but definitely something to check in with Coinbase for. It's nothing that we can necessarily help you with. They'd probably be the best guys to have a chat with in particular. Now, Pankaj Kumar, I hope it's Pankaj. Hopefully I didn't butcher that. You've mentioned, how do you use ZK Sync Era on, I'm assuming, Nano X? Now, one of the things to mention is that Ledger Live wouldn't support it, but I know you mentioned the device. All you'd be wanting to do is connect your Ledger device to MetaMask or any EVM supporting wallet that can support new or custom RPCs. Why custom RPCs is basically you interacting with a node by sending it transactions, sending it requests to get balances and things like that. That's kind of what an RPC node would do. But before I jump too far ahead, basically you install MetaMask. Remember, you'd want to use the connect hardware wallet feature. You can see here kind of part of the process where you connect your ledger, select your address. But once you've done that, you can select a multiple number of addresses as well. But once you've added the address, then you can go to, I know I mentioned it before, you can go to Chainlist. You can add ZK Sync Era. If I don't know, it's obviously just got released quite recently. Funnily enough, I had bridged to ZK Sync Lite just the day before they announced it. Yes, here we got Era here. And once you've added that, you can go about from there. I know there's a bridge to be able to bridge your assets over as well. So that gives you a really quick overview if you wanted to use to manage assets on zkSync Era there, Pankaj. And Carla, you mentioned you've forgotten your ledger password. So there's a couple of things that I wanted to make sure of because it could be a couple of things that could make a difference. Because if it's the password to your instance of Ledger Live, so if you have to enter the password to get into Ledger Live, then you can just uninstall and reinstall Ledger, your Ledger instance, and you should get a totally blank slate to be able to manage your assets from there. You might have to re-add your accounts. Now, if you mean the PIN code to your device, for example, then you can reset your device and you can restore from an existing recovery phrase. That way, you'd be able to gain access to the same assets. And if it's not, there's no password within Ledger Live that you need to reset as well, then that would mean that you can actually go and access the same addresses and accounts accordingly. If you've forgotten your recovery phrase, then it'd be something that I would definitely suggest sending your assets to addresses that are not derived from that recovery phrase. Now, why is that? Because in the event, let's say I've lost my recovery phrase, but I still have access to my device and my PIN, I can still manage my assets as per normal. If I were to lose the device, for example, then I would have no other way to be able to manage my assets, because without the recovery phrase the only thing I would have access to is my device. I can't get the recovery phrase from my device as well. So that would be the other potential option. Last, and the thing that I would consider the least likely, but does happen sometimes, is if you have forgotten your passphrase. It wouldn't be something that we'd have either, and we actually wouldn't be able to help you with being able to get those at all. So a couple of things to think about there. It just depends on what specific scenario you might be in. Hopefully I've covered them all. In most cases, as long as you have your recovery phrase and your passphrase, you'll be able to access your assets. If you've lost the recovery phrase, but you still have access to your device with the PIN, you'll be fine. Just make sure you move your assets over to a new address, and then you can reset and get a new recovery phrase, and then put those assets back onto the ledger, the addresses managed by the new recovery phrase. So making sure that you can remove accounts. If you needed to remove account, let's say my Ethereum account, for example, you can actually go up here, edit account, and then there's a remove option there as well. So hopefully, been tried to be as thorough as I can. Hopefully that goes through accordingly. You can go through and check what is appropriate for you specifically as well. Now, Donnie, you've mentioned that you have an NFT that dropped onto your ledger. So I'm assuming onto a ledger managed address. I'm wondering how. So if you don't know, let's just jump onto Etherscan, because if you didn't know, addresses are actually public, or your transactions are actually public, especially on chains like Ethereum or Binance Smart Chain or whatever it might be. Now, let's say I know the biggest, the most obvious one was this Vitalik's address. Now, I can see his transactions, what he's done, and things like that. So if you did, what will happen is someone might look at a block explorer. They'll say, hey, someone's just made a transaction. Let's just see. This is one of the latest transactions. Oh, someone's made a transaction. It looks like I think it's that they've deployed or done something. But in any case, they've just made an interaction with a smart contract. They set an approval. I can go here and I can check, this guy is doing certain things, and I can essentially send them an NFT. That totally is possible. The other thing that you might see is that you might see an NFT leaving your account, an NFT that you never asked for, you never paid for, didn't even have a mint in the transaction history, for example. And how would that work? Essentially, it's another, I think we've talked about parts of it before, where before you might have been getting transaction values of 0. In this particular case, what's happened is that they're calling a specific part of the transfer function. So transfer from, and then transferring from some guy's address. He just wants to get an NFT or a transaction in front of you, in the same way that advertisers maybe want to get something in front of your face to see. And so, is it safe to keep the unwanted NFT? Have you been sent it? That kind of thing. But if it's sent from your address, no need to worry as well. As long as you haven't signed any approve for all transactions, if you haven't given away your recovery phrase as well, I would say your assets would still be secure in most cases. In this case, it's just someone essentially trying to get an NFT in front of you in hopes that maybe you click a link, maybe you sign a transaction, maybe you try to buy it, that kind of thing. And in that way, they'll be able to compromise your assets or get money from you in some way. So I wouldn't worry about that in general, Donnie. But if you have more questions, if you wanted to really for us to delve into it, send us an email and we'll go from there. We can actually get your address, for example, especially if you don't want to have it out and about, and go and see how we can investigate that further in general. All right. So next question, Milan. You mentioned Milan Jankovic. You mentioned if Ledger supports a token GoChain, so a token on GoChain, I assume, but it is not supported in Ledger Live. Can I still store this token on a ledger? Now, I'm not directly aware of GoChain, but let's have a look. Let's see, because especially if they're EVM style transactions, or rather EVM style chains, it might be a thing that we can use a third-party wallet for. Not something that I can see as EVM based. It's not a token or anything, just doing my quick look through. And so I would generally say I don't think it is supported, but what I might suggest is you can get a hold of our dev team, have the devs get a hold of us, and then they can work on integrating that in particular. I see GoChain has an app that's a CLI as well, but no mention of Ledger devices even in their wallet as well. So it doesn't look like that's something that's supported as far as I can see at this stage there, Milan. So sorry to be the bearer of bad news there. Have them try to get a hold of us. Maybe we can try and give them a hand in integrating that in particular. Botros, I did answer that question already. Thank you for the question in particular. Next is my resolution is pretty terrible, but I think it's POG. How can I create an address to store my tokens, but not to be moving as far as price action? Just want to leave my tokens without them decreasing or increase in price. We can't do that. I wish we could do that. If I could do that, then I would be probably a trillionaire. But the tokens are the things that change price. It's not us that determines the price or you that determines the price. It's fair market value. This is trading, right? Like, so if someone's willing to pay you 1 USDT for 1 USDC, that's the way that it works. You can create an address to store your tokens, but you wouldn't be able to have them not decrease or increase in price. So I'm mistaking your question a little bit. You can try and pop into more detail, but yeah, wouldn't be able to stop them increasing, decreasing in price. But if you wanted to create an address, you would just go into Ledger Live, and you would go through the receive process. It can be different for different types of networks. So with the address that you might receive in Binance Smart Chain or Ethereum might be different from Atom or particular UTXO style accounts, so they wouldn't have a singular address necessarily. So like Bitcoin, that's the one I normally specifically mention in UTXO style. Cardano as well, actually, EUTXO in particular. So you would just go in, you'd go through to receive, and you'd go from there. If it's a UTXO style of network or chain, you might go through a receive process and get a different address on the same, based on the same extended public key. If you're on an Ethereum EVM style address, so like one that you stay with the same hex address for, then you'll be a way to confirm that that is your address that you received to, for example. So if you wanted to get more, you just add a new account, and then you'd get new addresses. You can only add one at a time in Ledger Live. If you wanted to check more of your addresses, you can go into MetaMask, for example. You can go through that same process I had mentioned previously with regards to connecting your Ledger device to MetaMask, for example, and you can get a bunch of addresses if you'd like as well. Generally want to keep it more simple, so that's why you can only add one address at a time in Ledger Live. So hopefully that answers your question, mate. We'll go from there if you have any more. Okay. Dirty, you mentioned, Botros, thank you as well, again, for the question. Dirty, you mentioned all the growth percentages are non-existent in Ledger Live. Shows daily growth as total wallet value each day. All right, so I can double check that, but yeah, it's definitely something we can look into. You can see I was rich. Nah, I'm joking, but we can definitely look into that for you. I'll make sure to pop that at least as a ticket internally, but also if you have more specifics, then you can raise a case with us, normally support.ledger.com, and then we can actually go into that more specifically with you, especially if it's not something that's affecting a lot of people. We might not get to the notification, or we might not have the knowledge that it's affecting you guys as well. So I'll raise that internally. Once I see that in particular, I'll jot that down and we'll go from there. All right. Next up, Jake Stanton. What is a bridge? I know I was talking about them before, so sorry it took so long to get to your question, Jake. But a bridge is essentially a way for you to get assets from one network to another. So if I have assets on, let's use DeFi Llama, just to get an idea for what a network is, because I can list them all, Ledger, not Ledger, in terms of chains, you can see Ethereum, Tron, BSC, Arbitrum, but BSC is Binance Smart Chain, or BNB Smart Chain, actually, I think they've changed. And these are all different chains that you might have assets on. You might have USDC, on Ethereum, on Binance Smart Chain, on Arbitrum, on Polygon, on Optimism, for example. If I wanted them all to be a token on one, to see them all in one place, essentially, on one network, I might need to send it from one network to another. They might even be at the same address, but just because they're at the same address doesn't mean that you are interacting with them they're actually on the same network. And that's kind of what a bridge does, is be able to send, essentially, without going into too much detail, one asset from one to another. So that's what you would use it for. The ones that I mentioned, I hope you saw those before, Jake. Those were things like a Cross.2, Rango, things like that. There are canonical bridges as well. So what I mean by that is bridges by the specific company. So Polygon has its own bridge, Arbitrum has its own bridge, Optimism has its own bridge to its own layer 2. So those are potential ways that you can send assets from one network to another. Hopefully that answers your question really briefly. I can go into more detail if you'd like, but it kind of falls outside of what we normally support, especially because normally they might need to, especially because these assets to be bridged between Polygon and Ethereum, definitely something you can do just with Ledger Live. But if you're bridging between Optimism and Arbitrum, for example, both of those networks aren't supported in Ledger Live yet. So definitely a cool feature. But yeah, give us a shout if you have any more questions, Jake. Now, thank you, Carla, for the question as well. JB, you've got another question here. Is there a possibility to integrate a trading bot into a hardware wallet? Generally speaking, I would say no. I wouldn't see necessarily the point, but what I could say is that, let's say you have a decentralized exchange that you're interacting with, and you've got your wallet set up as per usual. You might set an approve for all, so that that decentralized exchange can use, let's say, all of your USDC, for example, or all of your Ethereum to make trades and go from there. Once you've done that, then you can, if you understand how to, what is the word, call specific smart contract functions. Actually, let's see. I mean, this is way outside of what I might normally expect, but if you can call specific smart contract functions with, with the API, whatever, then you can use that. You can send the calls to the node to actually make those interactions as well. But even then, you probably would want to sign a message in most cases. So honestly, it wouldn't be something that you'd want to do, because it'd kind of ruin the point of the smart wallet, the hardware wallet. What I would normally be suggesting in these kinds of cases, if you're actually trying to use high frequency trading, algorithmic trading, no financial advice, is that you just have your hardware wallet set to store assets, and then you can have a hot wallet. Make sure your OPSEC is good, and transfer your proceeds into the hardware wallet until you need to use them again. That's generally what I think is best. It's what I personally do in my own setup as well. So not something that I would generally say is really, it is possible, but kind of ruins the point, in my opinion. So I know I didn't really answer the question there, JB, but while it is possible, not really something we'd normally ever recommend, actually, let alone try to guide you through. But hopefully that gives you a better idea for what you could potentially do. Lucifer mentions how easy is it to stake crypto with a ledger. Depends on what assets that you're trying to stake. There are a lot that are able to be staked within Ledger Live, that you can see with the button here, but you can see here what can be staked. But if there's something else that needs to be lent out, for example, or things like that, you can even go to this discover section as well, and that could probably have some other things that you can potentially run through if you needed to as well. For example, if you were using Kiln, if you wanted to lend assets as well, you might not actually do it. I don't think they have Aave in here, but you can connect to Aave as well, let's say with Wallet Connect, for example, and use that too. Lucifer, I think you mentioned XRP. I don't think XRP has a staking, has any specific staking mechanism. So not something that you'd be able to do in Ledger Live, or at all, if I remember correctly. Not something that I'd be aware of in particular. Now, Spiral Nebel, again, resolution on my second screen is terrible, but is it possible to buy HBAR in Hashpack? Is it only possible to buy HBAR in Hashpack on a desktop? Or where can I see the private key of my Hashpack wallet to import in the mobile app? I would never recommend to import a private key. to the point where we don't even allow the possibility of importing a private key or exporting a private key from your Ledger device. So that would be the first thing I'd mention there, Spiral. Second, though, would be in terms of places to purchase HBAR. I can double check on my phone now, and I might do that. But generally speaking, with Ledger purchase, you can go here. It actually changes based on where you're located in particular. So it might depend for your specific thing. If it's not available for you there, then it might be the case that you might need to purchase on another source. And I've done so before, not necessarily with Hashback, but with exchanges, for example. And as long as they support the withdrawal of the asset on the network that is supported in Ledger Live, you'll be good to go from there. But with regards to seeing the private key, not something we'd ever recommend. Ever. That would ruin or the security of your assets would be at risk, because if anyone had compromised your computer, they'd be able to see your private key and or your recovery phrase, which you might have to enter to get a private key, for example. So not something we suggest at all. Now, sweet and sour, you've mentioned, hello, can you show me how to transfer USDC from a ledger to a brokerage? You would, in terms of sending USDC, you would send it in the same way you send any asset. You can go to the send tab and then send it to whatever address that you might need to. Now, with that being said, I know you mentioned brokerage. That does depend if that brokerage or exchange, whatever it might be, supports it. So it does depend. You'd have to double check with the exchange. Do you support, USDC? Do you support Ethereum deposits? Next thing would be, do you support the particular network that you have your USDC on? So do you have it on Ethereum, or do you have it on Optimism, Arbitrum, whatever it might be? So those are the specific things that you need to consider. Once you do that, you just go through the send process, send it. Normally, when you deposit to an exchange, you would need to get an address from them, and with that address, you can deposit from there. As long as you know what's supported by the exchange, you should be good to go from there. All right, we'll just take a little break here. But what I wanted to mention, since we're halfway through, is guys, keep popping your questions into chat. My name's Felix. We're here to answer any questions you might have about Ledger devices, Ledger Live, or just crypto in general. I'll try to answer them all as best I can. And see if we can help you guys keep secure. Make sure your assets are yours going forward. So let's keep going. Thank you, JB and Lucifer as well. Diogo, you mentioned LedgerStacks already has a release date. We don't have anything specific at the moment for that for you, unfortunately, Diogo. But do keep an ear out. You can always check Twitter or something like that, and we'll try to let you guys know as soon as we know more as well. Now, if we keep going, subscripts, you mentioned you set up your Ledger Nano X using your desktop version of instance of Ledger Live. I normally use the word instance. And then I want to set up on your iPhone using the Ledger Live app. Will I be asked for your seed phrase on your iOS app? You absolutely will not be asked for your seed phrase, your recovery phrase, or your whatever it might be, ever. Only time that you'll be asked for it. Now, the big distinction in here is that if you're restoring your device, for example, you'll be asked for it to be input onto your Ledger device itself. So big difference, because if you're entering it on your computer, someone is able to read your recovery phrase that's stored on your computer in plain text. That would be very bad for security purposes, right? So no, you won't be asked for your recovery phrase, seed phrase on an iOS app, and you shouldn't be on any iOS app. If you are, 100% is going to be a fraudulent app. Now, with that being said, If you're managing your assets with the iOS device, going forward, you would then go about and you'd add your accounts accordingly. You can also add your accounts with the QR codes. I think it's here where you can export your assets accordingly. So you can go to accounts. Sorry, just got lost in the source there, and you can export your accounts right here. And that way you can just normally use a QR code to actually scan, and then it will know what addresses you are managing with your instance of Ledger Live on your iOS device as well. All right, so hopefully that answers the question, subscripts. I know it can be intimidating the first time. There's a lot of reading to do. But yeah, if you have any more questions, definitely let me know. We'll try to get them answered as best I can. Anthony Eamdy, you mentioned, is it wise to have Ledger Live on my phone? Definitely wise. I mean, I use it to check prices or just to double check certain things here and there. I actually don't do that many transactions personally, but I know many people that only use their phone. So no reason not to have it on your phone. In particular, remember, it's not, the recovery phrase isn't on Ledger Live as we've answered with subscripts. It's in the Ledger device itself, right? So if that's the case, with that being the case, it wouldn't mean that there's any security risk. The only potential security risk would be someone sees the balance in particular. And if you're at that level where that's a potential like physical security risk, you're probably doing better than me, to be honest. So it's the kind of thing where, yeah, if you don't want them to see the amount that you have, then you can actually add a password onto your instance of Ledger Live. So you can, when you log in, you actually have to type in my password 123 or whatever it might be to be able to see my balance in particular. But then to be able to manage the assets, you've got to have your Ledger device to actually sign the transactions and making sure that you are, checking where you're sending to and from, what contracts you're interacting with and how you're interacting with them on your trusted screen. So remembering that your Ledger device is the thing that's showing the truth. And let's say Ledger, even if someone had, for example, tried to give you a fraudulent version of Ledger Live, or if you're into some DApp that's really malicious, it's getting you to send them your NFTs or your assets. And it's saying, oh no, you're sending them to address A, which is your friend, but they're actually sending them to address B, which is the attacker's address. What you can do, what you know, is that when you sign the transaction, when it's not blind signed, when you sign the transaction, you can see, hey, I'm sending 1 Ethereum to my friend at address A. And I can set it for a nonce or whatever. So I know exactly what I'm signing. So making sure that you are checking what you're signing on the device when you're not blind signing is key to making sure that you're safe. A little bit of a tangent there, but yeah, definitely okay to have your Ledger Live on your phone, Anthony. So next question goes to John Smitty. You mentioned, how is staking safe on Ledger? I think it's a bit of a vague one for me. Staking is safe in the way that based on whatever the methodology is in particular. So let's say if we use let's say if we're staking Matic, for example, right? Matic is sent to the smart contract to secure the network. It's kind of how that and that is staked in particular. So that would depend on the smart contract, as well as making sure that you own the private keys for whatever. Normally you'll get some kind of token of reward, token that you can get back, for example. Something like, let's say with Ethereum, if you're staking Ethereum with Lido, so let's say there's a really big provider. If you're staking with Lido, you get ST ETH in return, right? And when you have ST ETH, you want to know that you're the only one that can have that, and that's basically what the ledger device would do for any other asset. You would be the one that has the recovery phrase from which the private keys are derived, and therefore you're the only one that can sign transactions to send and receive that particular asset. So tried to answer that question there. Although if you have something very specific, John, definitely let me know. Each type of staking can be different, and I actually might need to be more do more research, for example, or like be really specific if I wanted to talk about other types of staking, or like other different methodologies that you'd be staking, or assets that you'd be staking, for example. All right, let's keep going. Balladora, you've mentioned, can I explain how to claim NFTs from Ledger Market, and what is the Ledger Infinity Pass? Ledger Infinity Pass is something that you can potentially get normally at events, but with regards to NFTs from Ledger Market, if you would go to, that is entirely the wrong screen that I've got up. You can go to market.ledger.com, if I remember correctly. I think they've got that subdomain on lock. You can connect your wallet here, and if you have a specific NFT that you can see here, the Inspired by Ledger, that you can redeem for an NFT for a physical device, for example, then that would be something that you can do with the website here. Essentially, the NFT would be sent or taken, and then you would then put in your details to actually get your device in particular sent to you. So a great way to gift something to someone if you'd like to do so. So that kind of thing is really cool. You can just gift them the NFT. It's like, hey, here's a ledger. I don't want to know, your physical like your home address or anything like that. So it could be a way to send it for someone. All right. But if you have something, if you're getting stuck somewhere, definitely let me know. We'll try to give you a hand from there with that Balladora. Thank you again, Subscript, for the question. You also mentioned, is Ledger Live already safe from address poisoning? Now, address poisoning being safe from address poisoning wouldn't necessarily mean you don't receive it anymore, because you could want the most specific thing that we've stopped in particular is zero value transactions being sent. So, USDC, USDT, someone sending a zero value transaction to you or from, and then maybe in being a little bit lazy, instead of going through the receive process, you might go and pick up the address from your transaction history, which we would never recommend. And in doing so, when you pick up that address, it is the attacker's address. So that's definitely been stopped. But there are other types of ways that people can try to get, your eyeballs on something, either for you to click a link and things like that. And those kinds of things aren't necessarily stopped by Ledger Live, because remember, Ledger Live is just the interface that you interact with. What you'd be doing, like if it's something like an NFT that's been sent to you, you can hide it. That's the biggest one that I would do. Other than that, most of the address poisoning stuff isn't actually going to affect the security of your assets. So I think the big one that I think I'm really happy for is the zero value transactions, to be specific. All right. Jason Cruz, you mentioned hello. You've asked this before about a month ago, but wanted to see if you had an ETA on a video tutorial to set up a SatStack to use with your Bitcoin node. I don't have an ETA for that. I'll definitely jot that down. I know that my colleague, I'll get them in chat later to mention that, because he's the one, Dan, you guys know, he's normally the one that would be doing the stream on Monday, would be the one that would normally be potentially doing this as well. So I'll see if I can hound him and see if we can get some resources to do that as well. So keep popping your questions in. I have about 10 minutes left. We'll try to get all of your questions answered. Sorry, Jason, about that. But yeah, we'll see if we can have someone go through that process. At least an updated set of instructions for you, Jason, as well. If not, we'll go through, we'll see if we can get you a proper video as well. Now, next up, we had Pierre. Hello, you want to know if a complete integration of Elrond Web Wallet will be supported by Ledger Live. Now, Elrond Web Wallet, I'm just going to double check that in particular first, but currently you're unable to see tokens used for delegation, only those in staking. I wouldn't know when that would be the case, but we'll definitely jot that down so that the guys are aware that this is something that you're after in particular. I might just double check if we have that in the cards at all or anything. Not something off the top of my head, and this isn't the list I'll be looking at now isn't a complete or exhaustive list necessarily, but just to get a quick overview to see if it is something in particular. Let's have a look. Not something that I'm seeing really quickly scanning through, but definitely, yeah, I'll jot it down and we'll go from there as well. Thanks again, John Smitty and Gerard. No worries, always love having a chat with you guys. KP Weed, you have a question as well on how to send NFTs to a Ledger device, or Ledger managed address to be specific, on Coinbase. I wouldn't be able to help with that. You might have to double check with Coinbase, especially depending on, I don't know, maybe you have it in Coinbase Wallet or in Coinbase in particular. Can depend, but generally speaking, you might go through the withdrawal process for Coinbase, or if you have it in Coinbase Wallet, for example, which is a non-custodial wallet that's built by Coinbase, then you might just need to send it to the Ledger managed address in particular. Remember, it's not the Ledger device that holds your assets. Your assets actually aren't on the Ledger device. The Ledger device has the recovery phrase, and from there you can manage your assets accordingly with the private key that's derived from the recovery phrase, to be more specific. So sorry, couldn't help more with that one, but I'm definitely think that Coinbase should be able to give you a hand depending on those two. But those would be the first things that come to mind for me. Seems like I've gone through the questions a bit quick. I don't know if you guys had anything else you guys wanted to go through. I can keep chatting about I don't know, random stuff as well if you'd like. Oh, Seiji, you've got a question here. You've unsubscribed from Ledger Live on your friend's laptop after you created the trust line. Is this in order? I'm not sure what you mean by that in particular. I'm assuming there might have been a translation error there. Bear with me, I'm just gonna. But if I think, excuse me guys, if you've uninstalled Ledger Live, if that's what you mean, after you created a trust line, might need to go into more detail there, Sergi, because I'm not 100% sure what you mean by what you've said there. But yeah, we'll definitely try to give you a hand. I mean, I think worst case, we can actually go through and answer your question in a ticket as well. Normally support.ledger.com is where we be going through ledger.com, boom, and then we can actually answer that question. But I'm not 100% sure what you've meant here. Generally speaking, Ledger Live is only going to be showing addresses you've added. For example, if you've added your account in Ledger Live on a friend's computer, you can just remove them. You can go to Ledger Live here, accounts, and then you can remove that there. But I'm not 100% sure what you mean, so I'm kind of just shooting in the dark here. So actually, before I forget, this is where you remove it in the edit account section there. Balladora, you mentioned, when do you plan to deliver the ledger stacks if it's pre-ordered? I don't have a time frame for you, unfortunately. If I would be able to give you a more specific time frame, I definitely would, but no solid time frame as of yet, unfortunately. So sorry, I couldn't be more specific in that. Seiji, yep, I definitely read the explanation there, but couldn't see that in particular. So not sure what you might mean. Might need to go into more detail. The only thing that I can see there is just that you have unsubscribed from Ledger Live on your friend's laptop after you created the trust line. Is this in order? I'm not 100% sure what you've meant there. If there's anything above that, then you might need to retype it. Sometimes it can change. Might be blocked because of specific the things that you might have listed in there. Normally addresses or something like that, links, for example, that kind of thing. You've mentioned Malvin, you mentioned when will VeChain and ICP, Internet Computer, be on Ledger Live VeChain? In terms of when, let's go first of all, I wouldn't be able to say. VeChain, if you're not already aware, you can use something like Sync. ICP, I have to double check because it's not something that I remember off the top of my head, but I were to guess, and I'm checking now, yes, you'd be using NNS dApps or a web wallet style thing. Let's bring that over here to access ICP in particular. No time frame as to when I would be able to say there. So sorry, I couldn't give you a time frame on that one. You mentioned Optimism ain't on Ledger yet. Remember, it's not on Ledger Live, but you can manage it with your Ledger device, because I definitely do. Remember, you can just go into, let's get the support article up, but MetaMask. But you can connect your MetaMask with a Ledger device, so not to input your recovery phrase, and then you can add in the network with Chainlist, for example. I use it all the time. You can do it with Arbitrum, ZK Sync, or whatever new one you want to do. So definitely something to keep in mind there. Remember, Ledger Live, definitely a front end that you can use, but you can use other front ends if you want as well. In fact, you could build your own if you were so inclined. The last 3 minutes, so if you guys wanted to pop your questions into chat, we'll try to get those answered as best we can. Oh, nearly missed that, Terry. Terry mentioned for us to please support all ISO 2220022 coins, and I can definitely pass that on in particular. There we go. Yeah, just popping that in particular, popping that down so that we can write that down for you guys. But yes, Optimism is great. Got a small airdrop from them when they had like a tiny little airdrop for using it just recently, and also obviously if you guys haven't heard of the Arbitrum airdrop that happened as well, that was definitely a big thing that happened, causing the RPCs to go down, a lot of them anyway, and the claim website to go down. So that was very classic crypto stuff. And yes, sorry, I got sidetracked, but yes, thank you, Terry, for the suggestion. We'll make sure to keep that in mind. Seiji, yes, please. We wouldn't be able to send you a ticket, but you'd probably want to send us a ticket. You can go to support.ledger.com, and we can go from there. The bottom right-hand side, you can go to for contact us, and you'll be able to raise a ticket. If you want, you can even mention my name as well. My name's Felix, and we can try to have a chat with you from there. And see what we can do for you in particular. That just about wraps it up. If you guys have any more questions, pop them into the chat real quick. No, there's always a bit of delay, so you might not get that in. But yes, please guys, I always mention, don't give out your 24 words, don't give out any recovery phrase actually, and don't sign any transactions that you don't trust. There are always, phishing sites, things like that. No one will ever ask you for your recovery phrase at all. We just want you guys to stay safe. That should just be about it for me today. We'll be on tomorrow, just a little bit later, 4:30 Central European time, and we'll answer your questions there. Might have a little bit of fun stuff that I might go into tomorrow, and then we'll have some more stuff on with one of my colleagues, Pringe, and things like that as well. So yeah, tune in. We're trying to do something every day. We'll try to answer any questions that you have. Last 1 hour, you mentioned, can I use any kind of USB cable with your ledger, or the one it comes with? You can use any data cable. So just last one, quick one. Thanks again, guys. Tune in tomorrow and for the rest of the week. Hope you guys have a great week. Stay safe in the markets out there. Peace.